I always knew my sister Rebecca was jealous of me, but I never thought she'd stoop this low. After our mother's funeral, while I was drowning in grief and paperwork, Rebecca was busy planting seeds, telling everyone I was having a complete mental breakdown and couldn't be trusted with our $2 million inheritance. She thought she was so clever, manipulating our family, our doctor, even trying to get legal control over everything. But here's the thing about underestimating your older sister, who happens to be a corporate lawyer. I have a very particular set of skills when it comes to gathering evidence. So I decided to let her think her twisted plan was working perfectly, while I was actually building a case that would destroy her completely. By the time I was done, Rebecca learned the hard way that you should never try to gaslight someone who knows exactly how the legal system works. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Amanda, and I'm 32 years old. I've been a corporate lawyer for 8 years now, working at one of the top firms in the city. I've always been what you'd call the responsible one in my family, the one who got good grades, went to law school, built a career, and somehow always ended up fixing everyone else's problems. My younger sister Rebecca, on the other hand, is 28 and has spent most of her adult life floating between jobs, relationships, and what my parents always called finding herself. Growing up, our family dynamic was pretty typical, I suppose, but looking back now, I can see how toxic it really was. Rebecca was always the free spirit, the creative one, the one who got away with everything because she had this way of making you feel sorry for her. When she failed her classes, it was because the teachers didn't understand her learning style. When she got fired from jobs, it was because her bosses were unreasonable. When she couldn't pay rent, well, that's what big sisters are for, right? And me? I was the golden child academically and professionally, but I was also the family mediator, the problem solver, the one who always made excuses for Rebecca's behavior. She's just going through a phase, I'd tell our parents. She's figuring things out, I'd explain to our relatives when they asked why Rebecca had moved back home again at 26. I genuinely thought I was being a good sister by always having her back. Our mother had been battling cancer for 2 years before she passed away last spring. During those final months, guess who handled all the medical appointments, insurance paperwork, and difficult conversations with doctors? That's right, me. Rebecca would show up to visit sometimes, usually when she needed money. But she'd always leave in tears because seeing Mom sick was too emotional for her. Everyone praised her for being sensitive, while I was told I was so strong for handling everything. When Mom died, the pattern continued. I arranged the entire funeral, dealt with the paperwork, managed the medical bills, and somehow still had to comfort Rebecca, who was too devastated to help with any of the practical matters. Our family kept telling me how amazing I was being, how Mom would be so proud of how I was taking care of everything. But honestly, I was exhausted. I was grieving too, but everyone seemed to expect me to hold it together, because that's what I'd always done. The will reading was straightforward enough. Mom had left her estate worth about $2 million, including the family house split equally between Rebecca and me. The house itself, valued at around $800,000, was left to me, probably because Mom knew I'd actually take care of it. Rebecca's reaction was immediate and dramatic. "Mom always loved you more," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You get the house, the business investments, everything that actually matters." I felt terrible. Here I was, being given this incredible inheritance, and my little sister felt left out. So I did what I always did, I tried to fix it. "Becca, you can live in the house as long as you want," I told her. "We're partners in this. It's not about who gets what, it's about honoring Mom's memory together." She hugged me and thanked me, and for a moment, I thought we'd gotten through the hardest part. But looking back now, I realize that was the exact moment Rebecca started planning her scheme. It began subtly, the way these things always do. At the family dinner we had a week after the funeral, Rebecca made an offhand comment that should have been a red flag. "Amanda's been acting so strange since Mom died," she said with this concerned look on her face. "I mean, I know we're all grieving, but she's become obsessive about every little detail of the estate. I'm worried about her." I actually laughed it off. Of course I was focused on the estate details. There were taxes to file, accounts to close, properties to manage. Someone had to do it, and it sure wasn't going to be Rebecca. I'm just trying to make sure everything is handled properly, I explained. It's a lot of money and paperwork to manage. See what I mean? Rebecca said, giving our Aunt Carol a meaningful look. She's so stressed about the money. It's all she talks about. I should have paid more attention to that exchange, but I was too busy making excuses for her again. She was grieving, I told myself. She was probably feeling overwhelmed by the whole situation. It was easier for her to worry about me than to deal with her own feelings about Mom's death. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing little things. Conversations would stop when I walked into a room at family gatherings. People would give me these concerned, slightly pitying looks. Aunt Carol started asking me how I was holding up with this tone that suggested she thought I wasn't holding up well at all. The comments from Rebecca continued too. She'd tell people I'd been working too much, that I seemed paranoid about the estate, that I'd accused her of not helping enough, when really she was trying to give me space to process. Every time someone mentioned these concerns to me, I'd brush them off, and then actually end up comforting Rebecca about how worried she was about me. I was so focused on proving I was fine, that I didn't see what was really happening. Rebecca wasn't making innocent comments out of concern. She was systematically planting seeds of doubt about my mental state in the minds of our family members. And I was helping her do it by getting defensive, and then immediately apologizing for being defensive. The first time I really understood something was wrong was when Uncle Jim, our family patriarch, pulled me aside at a barbecue and suggested that maybe Rebecca should take on more of the estate responsibilities, since I seemed overwhelmed. This was coming from the same man who had spent years praising me for being so responsible and capable. But even then, instead of recognizing the manipulation, I just worked harder to prove I could handle everything. I stayed later at the office to manage estate paperwork. I made detailed lists and spreadsheets. I tried to anticipate every possible question or concern. All of this, of course, just made me look more obsessive and stressed to the family members, who were now primed to see my competence as evidence of instability. Rebecca, meanwhile, was playing the role of the concerned sister perfectly. She'd show up to family events looking worried and sad, asking everyone if they'd noticed changes in my behavior too. She had this way of making her manipulation sound like love and concern that was absolutely masterful. As that first month after Mom's death came to an end, I was exhausted, confused, and starting to doubt myself. Maybe I was being too controlling about the estate. Maybe grief was affecting me more than I realized. Maybe Rebecca was right to be concerned. I had no idea that my little sister had already started researching how to have someone declared mentally incompetent, or that she was documenting every tired moment, every stressed reaction, every time I forgot a small detail as evidence for her case. I was still making excuses for her behavior and trying to be the perfect big sister, while she was building a file to steal my entire inheritance. But that was all about to change. The manipulation campaign kicked into high gear about 6 weeks after Mom's funeral. Rebecca had apparently decided that subtle comments weren't working fast enough, so she escalated to what I can only describe as psychological warfare. It started when she somehow convinced our family doctor, Dr. Peterson, to call me for what he termed a wellness check. I was sitting in my office reviewing a contract when my assistant told me Dr. Peterson was on the line, saying it was urgent. "Amanda, I've had some concerns brought to my attention about your mental state," he said in that careful tone doctors use when they're trying not to spook you. "Your sister Rebecca came to see me yesterday. She's very worried about you." I felt my stomach drop. "What exactly did she tell you?" "She mentioned that you've been paranoid, talking about people being against you, obsessing over financial details to an unhealthy degree. She's concerned you might be having some kind of breakdown related to your mother's death." I was blindsided, completely blindsided. Here was our family doctor, someone who had known me since I was a child, questioning my mental health based on Rebecca's lies. "Dr. Peterson, I can assure you that I'm handling my grief just fine. I've been managing my mother's estate, which is complex, but that's not obsession, that's responsibility. "That's exactly the kind of defensive response Rebecca said you'd have," he replied, and I could hear him making notes. "I'd like you to come in for an evaluation, just to be safe." After I hung up, I sat in my office shaking. Not from mental instability, but from rage. How dare she involve our family doctor? How dare she make me sound like I was losing my mind to a medical professional? But it got worse. Much worse. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca started creating situations specifically designed to make me look unstable. I'd come home to find my keys missing, only to have Rebecca find them in bizarre places like the refrigerator or my bedroom closet. "Amanda, you really need to get help," she'd say with this perfectly concerned expression. "Normal people don't put their keys in the freezer." Except I knew I hadn't put them there. I'm a lawyer, I'm methodical about everything. I always put my keys on the same hook by the front door. But when I tried to explain this, it just made me sound more paranoid. She'd invite family over, and then create scenarios where I'd look bad. She'd hide important estate documents, and then ask me about them in front of everyone. When I couldn't find them, she'd shake her head sadly and whisper to Aunt Carol, "See what I mean? She can't keep track of anything anymore." The worst part was that it was working. I could see it in everyone's eyes. The way Uncle Jim would nod knowingly when Rebecca mentioned my episodes. The way Aunt Carol started speaking to me in that slow, careful voice people use with children or the elderly. Even my cousin Mike, who had always been neutral in family drama, started avoiding me altogether. Rebecca somehow found out about minor issues at my law firm too. I'd made a small mistake on a filing deadline, the kind of thing that happens to everyone occasionally, and suddenly Rebecca knew about it, and was telling the family that I was falling apart at work too. I realized she must have been talking to someone at my office, which was both humiliating and terrifying. The breaking point came when Rebecca suggested we needed a neutral lawyer to handle the estate because my judgment was compromised. She had Uncle Jim call me to suggest this, positioning it as a family intervention for my own good. "Amanda, we're all worried about you," Uncle Jim said during what Rebecca had orchestrated as a family meeting. "Maybe it would be better if you stepped back from the estate management until you get some help." I looked around the room at faces I'd known my entire life, and saw doubt in every single one of them. These people who had watched me graduate law school, build a successful career, handle every family crisis with competence and grace, they were all looking at me like I was a fragile, unstable person who couldn't be trusted. And Rebecca was sitting there with tears in her eyes, playing the role of the heartbroken sister who just wanted what was best for me. That night, I went home and did something I never thought I'd do. I searched Rebecca's room, and what I found changed everything. Hidden in her dresser drawer was a notebook filled with detailed observations about my behavior. But these weren't the worried notes of a concerned sister. These were calculated, strategic plans written in Rebecca's neat handwriting. Day 12 got Amanda to look defensive when Uncle Jim asked about estate. Need to push harder on the obsessive about money angle. Day 18 moved her keys to weird places 3 times this week. She's starting to question herself. Perfect. Day 22 called Dr. Peterson. He's on board with the mental health concerns. Amanda will be furious, which will just prove my point. But the entry that made my blood run cold was dated just 2 days earlier. Meeting with lawyer tomorrow to discuss conservatorship options. A few more weeks and she'll crack completely. Then everything will be mine. I sat on her bedroom floor holding that notebook, and for the first time in months, everything became crystal clear. This wasn't grief or concern or family drama. This was a calculated, systematic campaign to steal my inheritance by destroying my reputation and my sanity. Rebecca had been studying me like a predator studies prey, documenting my vulnerabilities, crafting a narrative that would convince everyone I loved that I was mentally unstable. And it was working perfectly. But here's what Rebecca didn't know about me. I might be a people pleaser who avoids family conflict, but I'm also a damn good lawyer. And she had just declared war on someone who understood exactly how evidence works. As I photographed every page of that notebook with my phone, I felt something shift inside me. The Amanda who made excuses for everyone, who sacrificed herself to keep peace, who let people walk all over her to avoid confrontation, that Amanda was done. It was time for Rebecca to meet the Amanda who had never lost a case in court. The next morning, I started planning my counterattack. And Rebecca had no idea what was coming for her. The next 3 months were the most challenging acting performance of my life. After finding Rebecca's notebook, I had to pretend I was still the clueless victim, while secretly building an airtight case against her. First, I hired a private investigator and a forensic accountant without telling anyone. Then I did something that felt completely against my nature. I started playing Rebecca's game better than she did. I began acting more scattered and paranoid around family members, but only when Rebecca was present to witness it. I'd forget conversations we'd just had, misplace things deliberately, and react with just the right amount of defensiveness when people expressed concern. Meanwhile, at work, I remained completely professional and competent, making sure my colleagues saw no signs of the mental breakdown Rebecca was describing. Rebecca was thrilled with my apparent deterioration. She started getting sloppy, confident that her plan was working perfectly. She began putting her schemes in text messages instead of hiding everything. Amanda had another episode today. She texted Aunt Carol. "I'm really worried she might hurt herself or make a terrible financial decision." What Rebecca didn't know was that I had installed recording apps on my phone and was documenting every conversation we had. I also started wearing a tiny recording device whenever I visited family. The smoking gun came when Rebecca got greedy. I discovered she had already moved $50,000 from one of the estate accounts into a personal account she'd opened in both our names. When I confronted her about it privately, she had the audacity to gaslight me again. "Amanda, you authorized that transfer," she said with perfect sincerity. "We talked about it last week. This is exactly what I'm worried about. You're forgetting conversations we've had." Except I had our entire conversation recorded, including the part where she admitted she'd made the transfer without telling me because she needed access to funds for Mom's memorial expenses that didn't exist. 2 weeks later, Rebecca filed paperwork to have me declared mentally incompetent and herself appointed as conservator of the entire estate. She scheduled a court hearing and brought every family member as witnesses to testify about my declining mental state. I showed up to court looking disheveled and confused, playing the part one final time. Rebecca presented her case beautifully, with Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim testifying about my paranoid behavior, my obsession with money, and my inability to handle basic responsibilities. "Your Honor," Rebecca said with tears in her eyes, "I love my sister, but she's not the same person she was before her mother died. She needs help, and I'm the only family member in a position to provide the oversight she requires." The judge seemed sympathetic. Rebecca's lawyer was confident. My family looked sad, but convinced they were doing the right thing. Then my lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to present some evidence that I believe will dramatically change the court's perspective on this case." He played the first recording, Rebecca admitting to Uncle Jim that she was building a case against me. The room went dead silent. Then came the recording of Rebecca confessing to moving estate funds without authorization. Uncle Jim's face went white. Next, my lawyer presented Rebecca's notebook, with every calculated, manipulative entry read aloud to the court. Aunt Carol audibly gasped when she heard the entry about using her as an emotional amplifier for spreading rumors about my mental state. But the coup de grace was when my lawyer announced that I had been wearing a recording device to today's hearing. We played back Rebecca's conversation with Aunt Carol in the hallway just 30 minutes earlier, where she bragged about how perfectly everything was going, and how she couldn't believe how easy it was to convince everyone that Amanda was crazy. "Your Honor," my lawyer continued, "we also have a complete psychiatric evaluation performed by Dr. Sarah Martinez, showing that my client has no signs of mental instability whatsoever. Additionally, we have statements from her colleagues confirming her continued professional competence. This entire conservatorship petition is based on fraud." The judge looked at Rebecca with disgust. "Ms. Rebecca, are these recordings accurate?" Rebecca tried to deny everything, but when you have someone's own voice saying the exact opposite of what they're claiming, there's not much wiggle room. Then I stood up. Gone was the confused, scattered woman who had walked into the courtroom. I spoke clearly and confidently. "Your Honor, My sister has conducted a systematic campaign of psychological manipulation and financial fraud against me. She has stolen $50,000 from our mother's estate, manipulated our family members through lies and gaslighting, and attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent, based entirely on fabricated evidence. I turned to look at Rebecca, who was crying, but these weren't her usual manipulative tears. These were tears of someone who had just realized their entire world was crashing down. I am pressing both civil and criminal charges against my sister for fraud, theft, and elder abuse. I am also requesting a restraining order preventing her from contacting me or any members of our family about estate matters. The transformation in the room was incredible. Uncle Jim looked mortified. Aunt Carol was staring at Rebecca like she'd never seen her before. Even Dr. Peterson, who had come to testify about my mental health concerns, was shaking his head in disbelief. 6 months later, Rebecca was sentenced to 3 years in prison for financial fraud and attempted theft. Due to her criminal activity, she forfeited her entire inheritance according to the terms of Mom's will. I ended up with the full estate, but honestly, that wasn't the victory that mattered most to me. The real victory was watching our family finally see Rebecca for who she truly was. No more excuses, no more enabling, no more treating her manipulation like it was just a personality quirk. As for me, I learned that being a good person doesn't mean being a doormat. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and even for the people trying to manipulate you is to refuse to play their games. Rebecca tried to contact me from prison once, claiming she had information about a secret will that could get her out. I deleted the message without reading past the first sentence. Some people never learn, but I finally had. If this story resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments if you've ever dealt with family manipulation like this. You're not alone, and you're stronger than you think. Until next time, remember, never let anyone convince you that your reality isn't real.